You were kidnapped by the Labour Party?
By the Labour Party,
Hmm.
Birmingham City Council, and the police, because I exposed their crimes committed against the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights Act 1948, Section 4, Section 22 to 25, and Section, or in other words, Article 30. Article 4, 22 to 25, and Article 30 was breached by them and per temps, and I exposed the crime, the international crime, national and international crime, and so it gradually grew to the stage where the Labour Party got into so much trouble, should have been arrested by the police, weren't. Police got into trouble for not arresting them, and then I asked for their arrest, and they'd also got the Birmingham City Council to attack my home to try and steal documents and evidence, and that's why they kidnapped me and put me in the Queen Elizabeth Psychiatric Hospital. Now it's the 26th of April 2008, and I'm still a political prisoner. Today, my carer has just informed the nurses that the Birmingham Race Attack Unit has told him to pass the message to them that they must not give me any more medication, because medication is either antidepressant, which works on the nervous system basically and calms you down, or an antipsychotic, which destroys the mind and the cells in the brain, because it stops you from thinking. If you can't think, you're not human. It stops your emotions. If you've got no emotions, you'll probably end up doing something wild, like in America, shooting people down dead with guns, your friends, and they haven't done anything to you, because why? The cells are damaged in the brain because of the antipsychotic drugs. And it also stops your other mental faculties. So this campaign is about abuse and drug abuse. The campaign, in my plight to get my freedom back from being a political prisoner in the Queen Elizabeth Psychiatric Hospital in Birmingham, is to expose the doctors' deliberate abuses of the psychiatric antipsychotic drugs, which is killing off people, like Tanya Gray was killed on the 23rd of February 2008, and the police and the coroners have covered it all up. They've burnt her body after I told them that I want to give evidence at the coroner's court. And how many more has died in this hospital because of these drugs will come out, because the people will now come out and open their mouths on our websites we're going to set up on the internet to expose them. So the question is, how many more? And who else is going to come from under the carpet with their plight? And we're going to add other patients who've been abused onto the website to give their story, and it will all make a big picture. So that psychiatrists are in serious trouble now, and the drugs industry. Part of my suffering since the 4th of August 2007 is that I found out that it seems to be highly possible some Nigerian doctors have sneaked into the country, perhaps with bogus doctor certificates, and set up a system where I think they're probably selling jobs to Nigerians who haven't really passed anything, but they will give them the job in the hospital, and that's why the hospital's packed out with Africans, killing off people with antipsychotic drugs. And that is an aspect that will come out, whether there is human trafficking going on into the doctor profession and psychiatric profession in Birmingham psychiatric hospitals, abusing people, murdering people, and covering up.
Which hospital are you being kept at the moment?
At the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham. They're now moving to the new building, the Barbary, the Holy something, Holy whatever it is, but they're moving across the road. Another aspect we hope to reveal is that every time an alleged mental patient is brought into these places and being murdered by these doctors with these drugs, doing that their minds, they came in with just perhaps a nervous problem, they end up being druggies on these antipsychotic drugs, zombies. Well, one of the aspects that's going to come out is that the police are ignoring the cries from these people in these hospitals, and they are not logging the complaints by the so-called patients who are shouting that they're being killed off by these drugs. So the police are covering up, and they're also human trafficking people into these same hospitals, because they'd rather win the case by crook, kidnapping a person in the street that stands up for their right, put them into a hospital, and they've got governors on the hospital board, police officers on the hospital board, laundering the civilians into the hospital system.
Yeah, carry on.
On the QEPH Board of Governors is the West Midlands Police. What happens is the police officers in the street won't get their bonus if they don't get enough arrests. So anytime they stop a person, it behoves them to get their bonus by arresting everybody. Now, once they've done it to a person a few times and they've got a bit of a friction between them and the public, anytime they stop the public again, the quickest way they have to win that bonus and protect themselves from liability is to put the person straight into the QEPH without a trial, so that the chief constable gets his bonus at the end of the year when they get their bonus. So this is like a human factory of drug abuse by antipsychotic drugs, spearheaded by the police and the psychiatrists who work in these hospitals. I'm not saying all, there's got to be some good ones, but most of them are on the gravy train of human trafficking people through the hospital to make big money. Another aspect which will come out is that these doctors on between 92 or 96,000 pounds a year, and they call themselves psychiatrists, they're trade puffing, I don't know what we would call it, trade puffing, where their profession has been expanded across the globe, across Birmingham at the moment, building new hospitals, securing that their industry will grow. And they're recruiting students into their folds, sending unqualified students to come and mess with patients, force themselves on patients, doctors prescribing drugs to make sure they spend all their money so they get more grants from the government next year. They abuse the nurse system to abuse the patients, and if they don't spend all the money, they don't get any more grants. And I mean, there's lots of aspects to that can be dragged out into different aspects of what will come out. One of the key aspects which will come out during our discourses and exposition of the corruption of the Birmingham Queen Elizabeth Psychiatric Hospital and the barbering in Old Leicester, whatever they're going to call it, is that these doctors, when they take a person off the street, if they are wrong, they are liable. So they cannot afford to let anybody go, even on a 28-day observation section. They must make them into a patient by hook or by crook, so they will write antipsychotic drugs and drive you out of your mind until, even if you had a tribunal, they will say you're out of your mind because the drugs is what's doing it, even if you weren't really sick. So when they bring you in by accident or by just observation, they cannot afford for you to sue them, so they will make sure that you're a patient by hook or by crook before the 28 days is over. Then the hospital is liable to cover up for them, and then the NHS is liable to cover up for the trusts that the hospital belong to. And once the trust is liable, the government of the day is liable. So they have locked down the system by setting in a tribunal system in there, which is a secret star chamber abolished by the 16th year of Charles I, Chapter 10 Act against star chambers and the Privy Council, which is the cabinet. And so that when a person appeals against a section, the doctors always get lawyers that operate around the hospital to sell the patients out by cutting some deal to go on medication until the appeal comes up. So when the appeal comes up, you're so zombified that the appeal people are saying, well, you've signed to go on medication and you've come to appeal to us, so there's nothing wrong with you. So the appeal system is set up to cover for the doctor, the hospital, the trusts, the NHS and the Labour Party, and that is why they've streamlined the whole of the mental health system to do such cover-ups.